I initially intended this to be a simple review video, but due to the variance in the development and design, I decided to make it a little bit of a history video as well. Enjoy. Our story begins in the sleepy town of Crown Point, Indiana. This is where Gordon Technologies resided, and produced rifles from the late 1990s into the early 2000s. You can encounter their more popular rifles, or well-known rifles, on Bulgarian Arsenal receivers, which they helped arsenal. Gordon Technologies was the originator of what we call the Tapco G2 trigger group. Originally designed and marketed by Gordon Technologies, the design was a double-hook trigger with no sleeve holding the trigger and disconnector together. The G2, as it was originally known, was a copy of the fire control groups found in the Bulgarian milled AKs at the time, and popped up in the late 1990s after the sunset of the assault weapons ban. The hammer was a typical run-of-the-mill, any AK would have it, and not the sharp, hard angles of the G2 hammer that we know today. During its run under the G-Tech brand, it was well respected, and I really can't find any negative feedback or poor reviews. That being said, on November 3rd of 2003, a post was made on the akfiles.com by what I'm assuming was an employee of Tapco at the time. Bill posted about the new G2 trigger group. The post reads as follows. After a long wait, we are glad to announce that the G2 Fire Control Group is in stock and shipping. These are the same high-quality units that you have bought from Gordon Technologies. Each part starts as an investment cast 4140 carbon steel. The parts are then machined to extremely tight tolerances, tested and hardened to meet and exceed military requirements. Then it goes on to talk about back orders. The single hook trigger model was made from the double hook. The right leg was carefully machined to give you a perfect fit and function with our complete set of fire control group parts. 100% made in the USA, no trigger slap. Remember, if it says Tapco USA G2, it has a lifetime guarantee. Besides the addition of the single hook trigger to the lineup and the expected logo change, it was pretty much the same trigger that we'd all been familiar with under the G-Tech version. Early Tapco G2 hammers remain a close copy of the Bulgarian hammers that Gordon had originally drawn inspiration from a few years earlier. Also, the trigger sleeve was not yet a thing. Shortly after the switchover, it was evident that buildings started to come into the mainstream for home builders. I start then to find negative comments from owners that, for lack of understanding on how an AK works, suggested some improvements to Tapco, and Tapco listened and made improvements along the way, and incorporated a design to make the hammer a little bit easier on the bolt carrier. Yeah, well, sort of. Basically, there were problems with trigger slap and the bolt carrier hanging up on those with a lack of wrist control and understanding of how an AK is intended to function. And ironically, all this change really did was to cause severe damage to the bolt carrier tail. Yeah, an improvement indeed. The next noticeable change is the trigger sleeve. This allows the trigger and disconnector to be installed as a unit for those who really can't seem to get it all together in one go. The Tapco G2 has been seen in many imported rifles over the years, including OPAPs, Wasser 10s for 922 or compliance purposes, as well as countless home builds. On a depressing note, in November of 2012, November seems to be a bad month for Tapco, it was announced that Remington would be running the show. Not really a fan of that. If you guys enjoy the work that Zeke Shoots does, consider giving a helping hand by donating on Patreon today. Visit the link in the description and check it out. There are monthly giveaways and Patreon-only content. Can't donate? Then hit that subscribe button and share this video today. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. Remember, live streams are every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central. I have used the Tapco G2 trigger groups in many of my personal builds. Both single and double hook triggers, I have found that they hold up pretty well for the cost and are fairly easy to tune. Knocking down the hard edges on the hammer face, or rounding it off I should say, does seem to allow it to go a little bit easier on the bolt carrier tail. Installation is fairly simple. Some receivers are tighter than others, so a little bit of tuning may need to be required. It is an AK after all. You need to build it, don't just put it together. The ease of assembly with the trigger sleeve is nice. The double hook, however, does add a little bit more stability to the overall function, but it is not something the average shooter would probably ever notice. As far as the longevity of the trigger group is concerned, I can say that I have personally seen a few G2 trigger groups in dire need of replacement. The first thing to go is usually the sleeve, but I have experienced the disconnector becoming so bashed up and deformed that it needs to be reshaped or replaced. The trigger hook tends to show some serious wear, but nothing as major as the disconnector. The hammer, however, seems to hold up pretty well. I have found that after 5,000 rounds, going back to the Riley Defense review here, I have found that after 5,000 rounds, the trigger group is nearly to the point of needing service. At 8 to 10,000 rounds, the life of the trigger group has usually run its course. This is with the Tapco version, not the Gordon Technologies version. I really haven't had a long-term test on a Gordon Technologies version. A couple of really good things about this trigger group, I would say, are that it can be used by pretty much any skill level to make any AK enjoyable to use. Also, that the history of the trigger group demonstrates within the community we are able to adapt to it. Many people like myself do miss the G-Tech hammer design and the non-sleeve version of the trigger and disconnector. Overall, I like it. It is what it is. It's cheap, it's effective, and it is very workable. However, do keep in mind, modify the face of the hammer before you put it into any collectible. The bolt carrier tail peening is normal, but it tends to be a little bit exacerbated by the hard angle on the current G2 trigger. Be sure to like and subscribe and share your Tapco or Gordon Technologies stories below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.